Recording. So welcome to live Q&A number 12. This is our final one. So just as a quick reminder, all of the previous Q&As are on my YouTube channel, which is at candy.thriving. So you're more than welcome to go back and revisit them at any time. That we've covered a lot in all of our time together. Welcome to those who are just joining. It's great to see you. And again, anyone who wants to be on camera, I love to see people rather than talking to space. So please feel free to be on camera. And if you can't, that's okay too. Yeah, and so, sorry, I'm just admitting more people here. And so, yeah, so there's a lot that we've covered over the last 11 live Q&As, and of course, we're going to cover more today. And so at any point, you're more than welcome to go back and revisit that. It's been a privilege and an honor to be doing these with you. And I'm looking forward to what shows up today. So feel free to start popping your questions in the chat. And while you're doing that, while I'm waiting for the ball to get rolling here, there was a request that had come in by email prior to this call asking about doing a future visualization. And we'll see if we have time at the end to do a guided visualization, but I did want to speak to a couple of aspects of that as a place to start for today. And so one thing to really keep in mind when you're creating your sensory-based vision for the future or future visualizations, that we really want to come at it from a place of resource self. And what I mean by that is really connecting to your strengths, your sense of competence, of capability, of wisdom or love. You know, it goes by so many different names. I call it the resource self, but in some programs it's called your adult main personality. It can be referred to as your higher and wiser self, or more of that true essence of who you really are. And we want to bring that aspect, that resourced, strong, capable, competent version of you on board before stepping into a future visualization so that you're coming at it from a place of strength. Because if we come at it from the part of us that's struggling with whatever challenges we're facing, we're coming at it from a place of lack. And in that space of lack, often we can sometimes have that little yeah, but in the background. It's like you're trying to create these beautiful visualizations, and there's a part of you that's like, yeah, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that. Or we feel sadness because we're not there yet, or we're missing something that we used to do in the past. So by connecting to our resource self first, we're really stepping into it from a place where you can get the most out of your future visualization, right? Like we know from the research that visualization is not helpful if you have that sadness or yeah, but in the background. What makes visualization potent is for us to really be able to step into feeling as though it's real, right? To really, on a sensory level and an emotional level, imagine that you are already there and acting in your imagination from that place as if it's real. Okay. So those are some things to keep in mind. And there's lots of ways that you can connect to the resource self, but one of the easiest ways is to go back in your mind to a memory or even possibly a few memories of a time where you felt that sense of accomplishment, or you were proud of yourself, or you felt that you handled something really well, or you overcame a challenge. And, you know, even in the situations of life where we've had a lot of challenges along the way, if we really start to look for them, we can find these moments, right? So I would say everybody, without exception, has those moments. You might have to dig a little for them if your brain is really heavily in the other neural pathways and neurochemistry, but it's a worthwhile endeavor because that's going to really support you in stepping into that bigger picture, seeing that part of you and bringing that part of you online to really support you in moving forward. All right, so that's what I'm gonna stop there with that, and let's go into the question. So there's a question here. I'm in a fight or flight response and trying to soften it. I am doing DNRS and journal speak. I never did much with incremental training and wondering how and if I should add it in now and if that would help. Annie said if you did not do it, you would have limited success, and it sticks in my mind. Also, any other suggestions would be appreciated. All right, so starting point with that, I would say what's more important at this point than incremental training would be to practice nervous system regulation strategies and tools. So, from my perspective, and again, this is just my opinion, but it's an educated one, right? That when you're in a dysregulated nervous system, trying to push through by doing incremental training or stepping into that training zone when your nervous system doesn't have the adequate level of resilience or tolerance in your window of regulation for a little bit of stressors, it's actually not that productive at that point to be jumping into incremental training. So I would say we want to look at it like this is a step-by-step process. And the first step would be to bring more capacity and more regulation into your nervous system. And then once that's there, absolutely, you can look at inviting in more incremental training within your training zone. And so, there's lots of stuff out there, nervous system wise. My personal preference, I love Jessica McGuire, Maguire. Her website, jessicamaguire.com. She has an 8-week vagus nerve program that it really teaches you how to tune in to what's happening in your nervous system and give you strategies to work with that. She also has like a couple-hour master class that could be a good starting point for someone who doesn't necessarily want to take on an 8-week thing. And she also has some free resources as well. But regardless of, whose sort of version of nervous system regulation you do, the starting point is to really cultivate that curious observer and to be able to notice the state that your nervous system is in, and then to apply the relevant tools to that particular state. So what I often see is that people who do, somatics or some nervous system regulation interventions, it's kind of can be a little bit of a one size fits all. It's like, oh, if you're in dysregulation, this is what you do to come back into regulation, instead of recognizing that there's certain tools that are more effective for certain states, right? And that being said, if you have tools that really work for you and you do find that they bring you back into regulation, then by all means, continue. That's a fit for you. And if not, that's where we want to look at, okay, so what is supportive, for example, when we're in a sympathetic arousal, right? When we're in fight or flight. Sometimes we need to have a little bit of movement, right? Sometimes we need to have a way of discharging that energy first before we try to do something that brings the system back into common regulation. So it could be, a little bit of shaking it out. It could be noticing, tuning into what your body wants to do and allowing that, to happen. It could be going for a walk first and then perhaps coming back and reorienting or connecting to your environment, connecting to your body, allowing your system to really settle. A beautiful practice for sympathetic arousal is called contact points. And it's where we start to bring attention to, like, for example, right now, sitting in your chair, you would start by noticing your feet on the ground and have this invitation of the ground to support your feet just a little bit more. And then we move up to like the backs of our legs and our sit bones on the chair. And same thing, starting with getting really curious about the sensations that you notice there. And then an invitation of allowing your chair to support you just a little bit more. And then you can do the same for your back as well. And what that does is it really sends bottom up messaging signals through our nervous system into our survival brain through the process of neuroception that tells your system that you're safe. And so that was kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gave you a starting point and to really, yeah, really invite you to bring in some more of that nervous system stuff before you go into incremental training. And I can say definitively that I've worked with people who've recovered who haven't necessarily done a lot of incremental training, like as a structured practice. However, they also did not have fear or let, their limbic system maladaptive pathways stop them from engaging in life a little bit more as and when opportunities presented themselves and as they were connecting with the things that they really wanted to do. So that's kind of the balance, right? Like we don't want to go into this where Annie, from my opinion, is very accurate is if we're in this place of fear of not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to do anything. Yes, that is not helpful, for recovery. We do need to push those growth edges a little bit, but there's a time and a place for that. And a little bit more regulation needs to be in place before we can really be effective, with that. All right, so moving on. So I had some labs that were run. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna close that so I can actually see the see the messages. That's helpful. All right. So I had some labs that were run for an IT that is definitely in the rewiring category. The doctor did not tell me he included those labs on the request. I really feel rewiring to safety is good enough and is the best way to work with this. Can I have a suggestion for rewiring this? All right, so a couple of thoughts around that. And the first one is to really remember that, when we look at what's happening, like bigger picture perspective, what is limbic system dysfunction? What's happening, right? The survival brain and our nervous system are stuck in a stress response. And we're not designed to be in a chronic stress response over a prolonged period of time. And so what happens because we're in that over a period, right? It starts to have what we would call downstream effects or secondary effects on other systems and processes in the body. And that can be any system or any process, right? So, certainly common ones, digestion, detoxification, immune, hormonal, those are kind of the biggest ones. But really, it's about recognizing that while our system is in this chronic survival state, and the other systems of our body are not getting the resources that they need in order to function optimally, we have stuff start to show up. And so when we look at the root for a lot of things, the root is actually rewiring the brain and regulating the nervous system. And as you do that, the other systems get the energy and resources they need to start to function optimally again and to correct the imbalances that are happening there. Now, that being said, sometimes it is helpful to have a holistic perspective of things that support your body or your system or your different systems while you're rewiring. And I'm not adverse to having supports in place and viewing them as this is temporary and this is really designed to help support the burden on my system while I'm in the process of rewiring, knowing that this is not the root problem and that as I address the root cause, this is going to sort itself out. And so this is just a little bit of support. So depending on what it is, that might be something that you want to consider. And if you're feeling very strongly that no, like I don't need that added, I can really step in and devote myself to the brain retraining and nervous system regulation components, and you want to, do that for a while and then revisit it down the road, ultimately that's your decision, right? And I've seen both of those perspectives or both of those options work well for people for sure. But we have to remember that the medical community, a lot of the medical community doesn't really understand fully the impact of, brain maladaptive pathways and chronic nervous system dysregulation, that this is still really sort of cutting edge science. And even, modern pain research really supports what we're talking about here as well, about rewiring the brain and regulating the nervous system and releasing any stored or repressed emotions as the root cause of the vast majority of chronic pain in the body, right? So research is catching up, but medical science isn't quite there yet, right? And so we want to kind of keep that in mind and really evaluate for yourself what's right for you, or get a second opinion. Like, obviously I'm not a medical professional, I can't say no, don't do that or do that, but what I can say is that we have this innate wisdom around what our body and system needs to heal. And when we calm our nervous system and rewire our brain, those mechanisms, that wisdom comes back online, and our body and our brain and our nervous system do what they need to do, right? In order to move us forward. And, supports are not along the way. Absolutely beautiful. And then in terms of, sort of practical rewiring strategies, if that thing is triggering you, you can certainly bring it into conscious awareness before you go into a round of practice, whatever rounds it is that you're doing or version of that, so that we can start to create a different pattern of association, and you can teach your limbic system and your nervous system that you are okay and that you're safe, regardless of the fact that this is something that's showing up right now, right? And so if you're doing rounds, that's what I would recommend to do. If you're not doing rounds, you can bring that up and then combine that with sending safety signals to your system, and elevate your emotional state, right? Or focus on something that takes you to an elevated state, a good, solid distraction that, again, is going to create that change of association. It's just not doing it through rounds, but it's still accomplishing the same thing. So hopefully that's helpful. So how can I think more positively when working with an it that is challenging in the past? Hmm. Um, well, I have a couple of thoughts about that, and hopefully I'm understanding that correctly, and hopefully this is helpful. And if it's not, please write me again, and I'll revisit it again. But what I'm thinking here is remembering again, when we have something that's challenging, what often happens is we end up with like blinders, near like horse blinders on. This is all we see is the challenge and the dysfunction and what wasn't working, and perhaps some fear around that that's going to come around again, or, just sort of focused on how challenging that was. And we're negating the bigger picture perspective, or the bigger picture context of that was not the only thing happening in your experience, right? Or that perhaps there were windows of time outside of that particular challenge where things were actually going fairly well for you. And so it is really good to have that practice of stepping back into the bigger picture perspective, to put things into a context of, yes, that's hard, or that was hard, and there's more to my life, or more to the bigger picture than just that. And so I would start there, and then also look at, kind of sending loving kindness messages and safety messages to yourself, that reminder of, if this was a challenge that was in the past that's not currently present, that this is not what's happening in the present moment, right? So we want to come back into the here and now and connect with what is true in the present moment, right? So when we look at, fear and anxiety, the vast, vast majority of the time, it's because we're either fixated on the past or forecasting the future. It is very, very rarely about what's going on in the here and now. So that mindful awareness, that reorienting back to the present moment, that connection with yourself with loving kindness, that yes, that was a difficult moment. Can I have compassion with myself? And then can I come back to what is true in this moment for me right now? And start to reteach your system not to live in that place of either past or future, right? And we can do that through neuroplasticity and through repetition. All right. And then another question relating to that, how would you address a past it that has resurfaced due to challenging life circumstances? Yeah. So again, I think keeping in mind the context of what is currently happening, right? And so when our system is experiencing more stress or more challenge because of a circumstance or situation currently, it does kind of flare things up, right? Like that is not an uncommon experience, not only for people in the brain retraining community or the rewiring community, but for people in life in general, right? That when we have a little bit more of a stress burden, it calls forward the things that are still maybe a little bit stuck in our system, are not fully resolved, even if we haven't been feeling them for a while. And so what I'm trying to say here is we really want to put it in the context of this is because of the current stressors that I'm experiencing, and this is temporary, right? Things are in upheaval in your system because of where you're currently at. And this too shall pass. This is not going to be ongoing. And it doesn't mean that those things um, have resurfaced because they're now going to be an ongoing problem. It just means that, okay, those maladaptive pathways are running a little bit more forcefully than they have been in a while or perhaps a long time. And so I'm seeing some of the old neural connections that, I haven't seen in a while. And that's all it is. And as I show up with loving kindness and self compassion, as I regulate my nervous system, as I really do what I need to do to take care of myself, as I orient to what's going to fill my cup, what's going to give back to me, what's going to feed my soul, as I'm navigating a less than ideal experience, all of those things are going to help settle it down and increase your window of tolerance or your window of regulation for the current life circumstance stressor. And then you're going to see a decrease in those old patterns or symptoms resurfacing. And just as, to share an example just from my own life, not so long ago, I experienced a significant loss in my life. And as I was processing, sort of the initial phase of that, I had huge amounts of chronic pain show up in my body, right? And I haven't had that in a really long time. And that was just a product of a really stressful and difficult emotional circumstance. And it's gone, right? Like it's completely melted away, and I was able to really step into, this is just a product of my circumstance. I know this isn't, old it's resurfacing. This is just where my nervous system is at and my brain is at because of the emotional stress. And this too shall pass. And that really helped my system move through that quicker rather than later, right? And to me, I'll also speak to that as a sign of resilience, which is ultimately what we're looking for in health and well-being. Like that's what it means to be healthy, is to have the level of resilience and the adaptability and flexibility to move in and out of different states, right? And so because of all of the work that I've done, I have a really large window of regulation, which means that I have space to contain some very challenging and difficult experiences and still be able to function, like to be here with you guys on this call today and to engage in my work, and that there's space for all of that, the totality of the experience. And yeah, there's little upheavals here and there, right? But we can see that that passes. And that's what it means, from my perspective, to be resilient or to be in a place of ideal well being, because life circumstances do happen, right? We're not living in a bubble. Life happens, challenges happen. And what we want to really know and teach our system is that no matter what shows up, we have the capacity to navigate it. And we can do that in a way where we stay connected with ourselves, because so much of us, so many of us, so much of the time, as soon as things get difficult, we abandon ourselves, right? And then it adds another layer of challenge on an already difficult situation. And that's why, my blogs in recent times have really been focused on cultivating that relationship with yourself, developing self compassion, showing up for yourself. Because what I've seen over the years of retraining is that is a fundamental piece if we really want to get to this place of ultimate well being and resilience. And so, yeah, so hopefully that is helpful. And I see Maria posted the link for Jessica McGuire, which is absolutely lovely. So the link is in the chat if you want to check out her stuff. And I'm just going to pause here for a moment and let's take a moment to kind of integrate. We've covered a lot of information in this last almost half hour. And so I want to create a pause for you to reflect on, out of what I've said so far, what's an aha moment for you or what resonates with you. And if you like, take a moment to just write it down so you've got that, for yourself. And so usually, even if the questions weren't your questions, there's something in there that you can relate to. So I'm just going to take a pause and you can go ahead and do that. We'll just take another minute to wrap up the thought that you're on. And of course, you can revisit this later as well. All right, so moving on. So the next question on our list here is, what is the best way to train on nightly migraines that wake the person up and have been there for decades? Yeah, so a couple of thoughts with that. Certainly, we want to do some intervention in the moment when you wake up, right? So it might be loving kindness and acceptance of what is rather than resisting what is, which acceptance is not the same thing as resignation, right? So it's not saying that we don't want this to change, but often, I think of the people talk about the equation suffering equals pain times resistance. So the pain is there, and if we add resistance on top of the experience, that's what often creates more suffering. We can actually have pain with less suffering based on how we orient towards it. So by being able to step into a place of, this is what my experience is in the moment, can I accept that? Can I give myself that loving kindness or compassion? That is one tool that could be very useful for you as you're rewiring this. Another tool is to really help your nervous system regulate in the moment, because that kind of experience is definitely a stressor, right? And sometimes part of that can be doing like a relaxation practice. I personally have had amazing results of thwarting migraines using relaxation, like a kind of like a progressive muscle relaxation without necessarily tensing my muscles, but focusing, starting on my feet, bringing awareness, inviting my feet to relax, and then telling my feet they are relaxed, and then kind of working my way up. That can be really helpful as well. Another factor that often comes into play when it comes to migraine is hormones and hormone regulation. And so if you're of the mindset that you're looking at a more holistic perspective and want to invite in a little bit of support while you're in the process of rewiring, knowing that, you can rewire migraines, and sometimes it's helpful to have some support along the way. You might want to get your hormones checked out if you haven't already. If that doesn't appeal to you, that's totally fine. It's not necessary for the vast majority of people in order to recover. But I just want to say, don't feel like a failure or not good enough, or somehow other people are better at retraining than you are if you do feel the need to employ external supports temporarily as you're going through the process, right? Everybody's journey is different, and my perspective is, why not take the path of least resistance that's going to really support you to get to where you need to go sooner rather than later, by having that added level of support if that's what you're really feeling that you need. And again, not required for everybody, but it's not a failure if you do bring some of that in at some point. And what's most important actually is how we orient to that. So we see it as a temporary support. We don't give it a lot of airtime. It's just, okay, this is part of my routine. I take this or I do this, and it's no different than having your meals in the day or brushing your teeth. Like, it's not important, right? It's just there and it's part of the situation, and we don't create a story around it or fear around it. That's the most useful way to really look at adding those supports. So definitely those things. You can do rounds if you want to do rounds of practice. So if it's waking you up and you're feeling that called to do that, or some sort of elevating your emotional state, going to a happy memory, thinking about people you love, like all of that can be really useful and helpful as well. And just one final idea for that kind of anything actually that wakes you up in the night, to really look at what you're doing immediately before sleep and try to incorporate something that takes you to a calm but elevated emotion as you're like in bed about to go to sleep, right? And so that's a great place for, thinking about the people that you love and what you love about them, or to go to, what you're really grateful for, or what the best part about today was, or, what you're really looking forward to. Or if there was a moment of beauty in your day or inspiration in your day, because what we focus on, or, sort of our neurochemical state that we're at right before we drift off to sleep, really sets the tone for what occurs during our sleep process. And so sometimes that sort of a mild intervention right before sleep can actually change the trajectory of what happens during our sleep. So please feel free to consider that. So the next question, tempted to go back on meds for this it, but higher self is wanting to rewire this it. I think I kind of spoke to that just now. about really inviting yourself, if you are feeling the need for support, not seeing that as a less than, seeing it as temporary. It's not a failure, right? And sometimes it is helpful to go, okay, I know this is due to the current life circumstance that I'm experiencing. Let's really hone in on filling my cup and rewiring and reevaluate in a couple weeks or a month and then decide if support is needed. So you can decide, tune into your own inner guidance. That's going to be your strongest ally in helping you move forward. So really tuning into that. So that's not in the head, that's dropping down into the heart or your gut, breathing into those areas, really tuning into what would be supportive of me and allowing the answer to bubble up. And that guidance, like, supersedes any other external guidance that you could possibly have, right? And that's actually a good thing to practice just in general, because that's a great thing to connect to in life as a whole, in helping you navigate and move forward and live a quality of life, once you are where you want to be. All right. So, coming back to one of the previous conversations or Q&As about, the testing, and it's saying that, he was talking about mold. So there's a whole rabbit hole involved in that. Yeah, and I totally get that, right? And so again, I can't legally or ethically tell you exactly what to do or what not to do. But what I can share with you is from my experience of working with people that, sometimes supporting the body in small ways, like having a binder to help you detoxify or doing some gentle detoxification protocols, has been helpful for people to release what's in the body. However, again, I've also seen people who have solely invested in brain retraining, knowing that as they rewire, again, one of the systems of the body that's affected that comes back online with rewiring is our detoxification system, right? And so our detoxification system comes back online and can start to, more effectively address some of these things that are in our system. And so I've seen people, like, with concrete evidence of labs before and after where they have been able to release things from their system, and other people who have chosen to do, the combination and found that very effective, right? And to just know and remember that you have choice all the way along. So just because the medical practitioner wants you to go down this entire rabbit hole and do all of these things, you don't have to do that. And it's not an all or nothing situation, right? You can pick and choose, right? There's a lot of shades of gray in between that black and white or all or nothing. And you can pick and choose what fits for you. Ultimately, this is your recovery journey. It's, you have that agency and empowerment to decide what you want to do when you want to do it. And you also have the empowerment to change your mind at any time, right? And so reconnecting with that inner strength, or that resource and empowerment, is going to support you in whatever it is that you decide to do. All right. And so final question, and then we'll get on to, oh, we might have time for one more if anyone wants to pop one more in, but then we'll get on to, I have a little different practice for us to end today, but I'll get to that when we get there. So the next question is, how do we practice feeling and knowing that inner guidance again? What the quest, I'm not sure what that means, to know it's coming from my inner guidance and higher self. Oh, so I'm getting that. So how do you know that it's coming from inner guidance? So inner guidance is never fear oriented. That's number one, right? So if you're trying to do something because you're trying to avoid something or you're afraid of something, that's not your inner guidance. That you can just cancel out right there. Another way of really helping yourself tune into that inner guidance is to do, the quick coherence technique from the Institute of Heart Math. And so what that looks like is we drop our attention to our heart And then we focus on bringing our breath in and out of our heart. So we imagine ourselves breathing in and out through your heart. And then you activate some kind of elevated emotion, whether that's, gratitude or love or compassion, loving kindness, whatever you want. We activate a little bit of that elevated emotion. And just by doing that already, first of all, energy follows attention. So because your attention is on your heart, not your head, your energy is going to drop down into your heart. You're going to be cultivating a connection and more awareness with the brain cells around your heart. Okay. Which we know we have, and they're not filtered in the same way as the brain. And that's why, that inner guidance can really be powerful in guiding us in the right direction in a way that our analytical brain cannot. But that's an aside. Okay. So coming back, so we're connected to our heart, we're evoking an elevated emotion. And then you can ask yourself, ask that deeper place or that essence of you what it is that you want to ask, or tune in to see, what guidance is there. And sometimes people find it helpful, like if you're trying to decide between two options, if you spend a moment really, connecting with your heart and tuning in, and I like to place my hand on my heart too, because then you can feel like that support of your hand as well, and the oxytocin really helps you get into that more elevated state. Then you can also ask yourself one at a time the options, right? So you would tune in once you're really feeling a little bit more connected, you're noticing your breath through your heart, you've got a little bit of some kind of elevated emotion, then you would bring up option number 1 and just be really curious, like, really step into that curious observer to notice what changes physiologically as you consider that option. So sometimes our inner guidance, like sometimes we'll get a knowing in kind of words or an intellectual thought, and sometimes it's more about how our system responds to something. Right? And so option number 1, so let's say I'm contemplating and I go to option number 1 and I'm noticing as soon as I bring it up, my muscles tense a little bit or my chest feels constricted, or I feel sick to my stomach maybe. Like I'm just throwing ideas out there. It doesn't necessarily have to show up this way, but that's information, right? And then we let that go. We come back to just breathing in and out of our heart, feeling our hands supporting our heart, feeling maybe some loving kindness or elevated emotion. And then you step into option number 2 and just bring that into your awareness. And maybe you notice with option number 2, there's actually a little bit of expansion in your chest. Or maybe you notice you take a deep breath or your breath is a little bit fuller. Or maybe your shoulders drop a little bit. Again, information. So chances are in that case, option number 2 is probably a better fit for you than option number 1, according to your inner guidance. And so you can play with that, right? And just like any skill or any practice, we want to adopt a growth mindset and know that the more we tune in and the more we practice with it and the more we listen to it, the stronger it will become, right? And, if you're in kind of a sympathetic arousal or fight or flight, you might have to do a little bit of the discharging that energy and coming back into regulation before you can access that. Or you might find that quick coherence technique with your heart already takes you into that place of being able to access that. So again, we want to play with this, right? We want to be the curious observer. We want to play with it, be open to the possibilities, have that growth mindset that this might be a new concept and this is a skill that you're developing in your system, so it might not be perfect right away, and that's okay. And that's what really helps us to reconnect with that. All right. So I think we got through everything. I don't think that there's any other questions. Oh, one more just popped in. So I'll answer this and then we'll go into our practice. So, do you have any tips for dealing with the shorter days and for me, lower mood of winter? Yes, the biggest one is to get natural light on your face within a half hour of waking first thing in the morning. Now, that natural light does not have to be sunshine, right? So if you're somewhere where it's gray and overcast, doesn't matter. Still getting outside, ideally outside, and getting that natural light on your face makes a difference. If that's not possible, an alternative would be like a full spectrum light or a happy light. Those can be incredibly helpful too. And I know like Amazon and other places have lots of different options for those. And what you would do is you just turn that light on again first thing in the morning within a half hour of waking. Ideally 15 to 20 minutes is optimal. But even less than that is better than nothing. And that really kind of not only does it set our circadian rhythm for the day, so it actually really helps people get good quality sleep, but it also regulates some of that mood, those mood elements or aspects. And so, if you are using a light, you can have it shining on you while you're doing other things, right? Like you don't have to, necessarily just sit there and be focused on allowing it to shine on you, right? So some people will put it, let's say they're doing stuff in the kitchen, they might put it in the kitchen, or if you're, checking your emails or doing something in the morning, or if you're meditating, you could have it shining on you while you're meditating. Anything like that, that for myself, both personally and in working with other people, has been hands down by far the most effective mood regulator for the winter season. Outside of that, I would say, again, really looking at bringing in more things that fill your cup, that you enjoy, even if you're not necessarily feeling the joy of it initially in the moment as you're doing them, start to do them because it's going to access the neural pathways and neurochemistry that is previously associated with the things that you enjoy. And so it'll start to bring more of that online, right? And so looking at those things, starting to bring in those things, really seeing a big part of your retraining right now is fun and joy and playfulness and openness to curiosity and possibility, taking in the beauty around you. All of those elevated spectrum kind of things will start to bring online more those neural pathways and neurochemistry that are maybe a little bit more shut down because of the weather, right? And again, any kind of self-compassion practice, because you're releasing oxytocin. So either the self-compassion break, hand on your heart, little bit of a squeeze, hand on your cheek, all of those will also be helpful. And a final piece around that is not underestimating the value of social engagement, right? So when we're looking at changing our mood, by bringing our social engagement aspect of our nervous system online with people that you find, you have a really loving connection with, or you find they're uplifting to be around or to talk to, or for some people it's animals, right? If you have animals or pets in your life, that can also, invite that in, that sort of engagement, um and doing it with discretion, right? Like really choosing, don't contact the people who are like draining for you to be around or a bummer, right? Pick the people that you really adore or appreciate, and even just a little phone call or a video conversation, or getting together in person even if you don't feel like it. Sometimes that's what we need, or that can be really helpful or useful, again, to start to activate that elevated neurochemistry and get you back into the alternative neural pathways, right? And to just really see this as a practice. So it might be a little bit hit and miss at first, or you might be like, yeah, I'm doing these things, but I'm not feeling it. That's okay. Doesn't mean it's not changing your brain or your neurochemistry. It's just not at the place of critical mass yet where you're actually feeling it, right? And so allowing a little bit of grace, a little bit of time to really allow that to rebuild in your system, is beautiful. All right. So on that note, what I would love to do today, and I think it's very fitting, just given, some of the questions that we've had, rather than doing the alternate nostril breathing and meditation to end today, I would love to walk you through a nervous system regulation practice. called exteroception. And so I love this practice because it's useful regardless of what state your nervous system is in, right? So we can be in hyperarousal or a fight or flight sympathetic activation, or we can be in the hypoarousal, more of the shutdown, dissociated, disconnected state, or we can be in blended states. And it's one of the few tools that's really useful for bottom up signaling through the nervous system of safety and connection messages, regardless of what state that you're in. So you don't have to try and figure it out. Now, a lot of you will probably be familiar with it or something similar to it because it's often used in somatic practices and often referred to as orienting. So, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be orienting to our environment through our eyes, through sound, and at the same time connecting with our body being connected to the environment. So, I'm going to guide you through this. I'll walk you through step by step. But that's what we're doing. And again, it's really a bottom up practice of signaling through the ways in which we take information directly into our nervous system and our survival brain that in this moment, all is well and that we are safe. All right, so to begin, find a comfortable way to sit. So just sitting in a way where you're at ease, but also alert. And if you want or feel called, you can kind of roll your shoulders back and down, maybe lengthen your spine a little bit, allowing your face to soften, and just taking in a breath or two before we begin. And then when you're ready, you're going to allow your eyes to very slowly start to move towards one side of the room. And so we're doing this very slowly. You're allowing your head and neck to kind of follow your eyes as you're taking in what you see. And even if you've seen these things in your environment 1,000 times before, we're looking at them as though we're seeing them for the first time. So, really taking in the details, the colors, the textures. And when you're ready and you feel called, you can slowly begin to turn your head back towards the center as you continue to take in what you see. And eventually, you're going to continue on in the other direction. First, allowing your eyes to move and then your head and neck to follow. And if it's helpful, you can mentally whisper to yourself what you see. If it helps you take it in or stay focused. And as we continue to allow our eyes and our head to move, taking in what we see, feel your feet connected to the earth or whatever your feet are planted on. And just notice how the ground or whatever you're planted on is supporting you. Allowing your feet to really relax into the surface. Noticing that connection. And when you're ready, with your eyes and head, you can start to move back towards center and also any other direction that you want, right? So if your eyes want to kind of go up and take in what's upwards in your environment, you can, or down. And if you feel at any point you want to just stop and focus on one particular thing and really take in the details of that, go ahead. Really just make this the right fit for you. And as you're taking in those sight details, once again, we come back to our feet. And now inviting in the noticing or the awareness of your sit bones and the backs of your legs on your chair or whatever surface you're sitting on. Notice the connection, the parts that are more in contact with the surface and the parts that are not. You might notice a difference between your left side and your right side too. So just being curious about that. And again, inviting the chair to really support you as you continue to take in your environment. And now inviting in, as we stay connected to our feet and to our sit bones, we're going to invite in the sounds that we hear, starting with the sounds that are close in. Noticing with curiosity, what do you hear? And then moving to the more distant sounds. And once again, as you're doing this, connecting with your feet and your sit bones. And maybe if your back is against a surface, noticing the connection of your back as well. And then in your own time, you can let go of the practice, closing your eyes if you feel called or a soft downward gaze, and just taking a moment with curiosity, noticing what you notice inside. Perhaps there's been a shift since where we started, or if you don't really know where you were at, where you started, that's okay. Just noticing what's present now. Perhaps the breath is fuller. Maybe you're noticing you feel more present and you can really feel your feet or your sit bones. Maybe you're feeling more energy and vitality moving in your system, or you have tingling or other sensations. Perhaps your muscles or certain muscles are feeling nice and settled. So simply taking in without judgment and without trying to change anything, just with that curious mindset, like, where is my system at in this moment? And then taking a moment to give yourself thanks and loving kindness for showing up today and for engaging in this Q&A and in the practice to support your nervous system. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if you haven't already, coming back into the room, into the space. And if you feel called at all to move or to stretch, oh, take a moment to do that. Ah, beautiful. So, once again, I just want to say, how honored and blessed I feel to support you all in this way over these last 12 Q&As. And I wish you all every success in your rewiring, a very beautiful and happy holiday. And I hope the new year brings such amazing things your way, like beyond your imagination of what's possible for you. And that's the space that I hold for you. And yeah, and again, this will be posted on YouTube. So by all means, you can come back and revisit this and the other ones at any point in time. And I will continue to write my blog. So if any questions come up and you want answers, feel free to email me and I'm happy to include that, in my blogs moving forward. So best wishes to everybody and take care. And I hope, yeah, I just wish you well. All right. Bye.
Thanks, Candy.
You're welcome.
Bye.